From the Oklahoman newsroom, it's time for Orange Alert Spring Football Edition. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell and OSU beat writer Scott Wright. Guys, Saturday, OSU Spring Scrimmage. They're not calling it a spring game. Don't quite have the personnel to call it a full-fledged game, but obviously lots that people are interested in seeing on Saturday afternoon up in Stillwater, and that starts probably 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with quarterbacks, Scott. People want to know what Spencer Sanders looks like, what Drew Brown looks like. What can we expect out of these guys on Saturday?
Well, it's going to be interesting because of the way that they're setting this up. It's going to be a lot more like a regular practice for these guys. There's going to be some one-on-one drills, some throwing drills where you just get to see them, drop back and throw a pass to a guy against air and things like that. It's going to be a lot different. You see some 7-on-7 and see how they read in defenses in those scenarios. So it's going to be really unique because it's not going to be that full 11-on-11 game setting the entire time. You're going to get to kind of go behind the curtain a little bit and feel like you're watching a real practice. And yeah, it might not sound as exciting, but I think you're going to get to see maybe a little bit more than you would if they came out and tried to act like they're running some version of the offense, which they're not going to show you anything anyway. So it's going to be a fun setting to see some things in a little bit different way, even though it's not a typical game. I think that the fans will enjoy getting to see the different things that these guys do, some of the drills that they go through, some of the passes that they'll throw. Mike Gundy mentioned he wants this to be a little bit of a show for the fans. Make sure that Tylan Wallace is getting the ball thrown his way enough times, and guys are getting to do what the fans want to see. So I think it's going to be good. Hard to say how much helpful it'll be for those of us who are trying to figure out who the next quarterback's going to be, but it'll at least be watching guys throw the ball rather than Drew Brown handing off to LD Brown one time and we all go home.
Yeah, we've seen that movie. Yeah. We know how that one goes. Barry, I mean, considering this is a little bit more of a practice structure that these guys are used to, very comfortable in, we may not be able to know what they're going to look like in a game, but it's going to be familiar and how they perform. Is there anything you think we can take away from that, just in the comfortable settings? Obviously, people in the stands that aren't normally there. But does maybe that translate more to what's being seen behind the scenes as well when nobody's watching, that maybe we can say, hey, if one guy is looking a lot better, maybe that starts to trend that way?
Well, if there's people in the seats, that gives the coaches an extra piece of information, because players, not just athletes, people of all genres, perform different when people are watching. And what you do in the comfort of your own sort of limited environment, when it's opened up, things change. So that's information the coaches you can use. How do these guys perform when the lights are on, no matter what they're doing? What we've said about spring games applies to this as well. Even if they were blocking and tackling more than they're going to, we still wouldn't know a whole lot. But the pitch and catch aspect of football is something that we can sort of gauge. And are these guys able to deliver on target the football? Now, when it's 7-on-7 and going against air, that's different than if there's defenders out there. But it's still a case of, do they, can they at least do that? Can they deliver the ball on target when guys are running routes in practice? So that'll be the thing I most watch, because that's the thing I can sort of figure out.
Scott, let's say one of these guys, Brown or Sanders, just looks head and shoulders above the other guy. Do you think there's any chance that we get a decision, maybe not on Saturday, but sooner than in the past? Mike Gundy, when he's had a quarterback competition, it's always lingered into August, sometimes almost a game week. I mean, last year, obviously, surprised us all when he said at Big 12 Media Day, oh yeah, Taylor Cornelius is the guy. Okay. But do you think that this portends anything if one guy is way ahead of the other?
I don't know publicly that it's going to lead to anything, but it certainly is going to have a big impact because of what Barry said. we asked Sean Gleason about that when he spoke this week. What do you learn from these guys in this setting? And he says, it's do you sink or do you swim? Mm-hmm. And how do you handle it when the lights are on? And for Spencer Sanders, this is going to be really his first time in this environment at the college level. Drew Brown has obviously played some games in Hawaii, probably about the same number of fans that'll be at practice on Saturday. But still, he's been in this environment a little bit more. Sean Gleason said that talking to him is almost more like talking to a coach, because he played junior college ball. He played 2 years at Hawaii. He played under Mike Yurcich last year, and now he's got Sean Gleason. So he's seen a lot of versions of different offenses and different ways to communicate. So he said it's where Spencer Sanders is more of a blank canvas. Drew Brown is almost more like a veteran with a coach's mind because he's seen so much. So, but how they react in this situation is going to be very telling and very important for how this all goes. I mean, the players are going to see it too, and they're going to know going into summer workouts and all the 7-on-7 and the different things that they do on their own over the summer. They're going to know who has shown themselves as a real leader in this scenario, and I think that that's going to be important.
Barry, I know some people think that regardless of how Saturday goes, regardless of when and how Mike Gundy chooses to announce his next quarterback, for the long term, look at the Cowboys. Spencer Sanders almost needs to be the guy. You get a guy in there, he's your quarterback for a while. Drew Brown, again, just a one-year guy at this point. Do you buy any of that? I mean, is that a situation where Mike Gundy has to not only be weighing the here and now, but potentially down the road to maybe eventually make that decision, Spencer Sanders is the guy?
Well, I think if it's anytime there's a really close competition, which means that coaches may not even know which one is really the clear winner, and also means the players are either split or don't know, then I think you go with the younger guy because the upside is greater, the future is brighter, all those things. But if there's clear separation, I think you don't make a decision for the future because that could impact the current team. That could lead to dissension on the squad. If the players know who the quarterback is, then that needs to be your quarterback. You run into trouble when you sort of go against convention and go against what everybody knows. That's what, to me, leads to chemistry issues. If the team knows, and you got to go that way. The question is, do they know?
What's your sense right now, Scotty, about OSU's always been pretty close-lipped, and players and coaches, where things stand with quarterback battles? Are there any cracks in that facade? I mean, Sean Gleason, obviously, we'll talk about him here in a second. New guy on the scene. Are we getting any hints dropped anywhere by anybody on this whole thing?
Not really. Very, very little. There's a lot of talk about Spencer Sanders' athleticism and Drew Brown's sort of veteran mentality, but there's nobody that really says, this guy took a step forward this week where this guy didn't, or vice versa. So it's been really tough to gauge just exactly how people feel. In fact, a lot of times when you ask guys about a quarterback, the answer they give you is about both quarterbacks. They've been really good about not talking about one guy specifically. Really, when Sean Gleason talked earlier this week about that and said those things that I mentioned earlier about Sanders being the blank canvas and Brown being the more veteran type mind, the coaching type mind, that was the first real differentiation of the guys at all that we've heard just about. So it's been really tough to get any idea really where these two guys stand. Mike Gundy says they've been impressed with both of them. They had a scrimmage last Friday, no turnovers by the quarterbacks at all in that scrimmage, and Gundy was really fired up about that. So they're making steps in the right direction, but it's virtually impossible for those of us on the outside right now to get any kind of gauge as to who might be leading this race.
Barry, what about Sean Gleason? I mean, we're not going to, with this being more of a scrimmage practice type of situation instead of a game, we're not going to really see a ton of the offense. But what are you looking for in terms of Sean Gleason, his impact on the offense, on what the Cowboys are going to look like moving forward? Is there anything that you'll be keeping an eye on just to see if it's different at all from Yurcich to Gleason?
Well, I will be looking at the formations and whatnot. I would be stunned if there's any deviation from what we've seen. For one thing, I don't think even if there is going to be changes come fall, it's like Scotty said, they're not going to show us in this practice. So I doubt we see much different. And Mike Gundy's been on record for years and years and years. He's not interested in somebody coming in and making over the Oklahoma State offense. He wants somebody that comes in and runs the OSU offense, and that's certainly what he did when he hired Todd Monken. It's what he did when he hired Mike Yurcich. So I don't think he wants Gleason to come in and do any kind of extreme change. I think he wants Gleason to put wrinkles into what the Cowboys have been doing. So I expect no change.
Scotty, what is your sense at this point? Now we're several weeks into spring ball, coming to the end. Are you getting a feel for how Sean Gleason does things different, does things the same? I mean, as we've talked and as Barry mentioned, Mike Gundy's hiring offensive coordinators to run this offense, not to overhaul the offense. So I don't expect a ton of change, but what are you seeing as far as impact and fingerprints on this offense from Gleason?
One of the things that's been talked about a lot is the fact that he's a very detail-oriented guy, which most offensive coordinators are, but he has different areas of things that are important to him. For instance, quarterback footwork is a really big deal to him, and we asked him about it earlier this week, and he said it was because when he was a college quarterback, his footwork was horrible. And so coaches worked really hard with him to get his footwork right, to make sure he was taking steps properly and dropping back into the pocket to throw or moving out of the pocket, whatever it might be. So footwork is a really big deal to him, and he's brought some new drills that the quarterbacks do that focus on footwork or how they use their hands and different things like that. So very detailed guy, but looking at some different things in those areas. Now, one of the things that has been unique about this spring compared to the past, they've been using headsets a lot. He's been going upstairs, even when they're in the indoor facility, going up to the upstairs area and communicating from up there, which has been, I think, good for the team long term, because it gets them comfortable with how to communicate and what he's going to be like on the headsets, things like that. But maybe in the short term, it's been a little bit frustrating, because he mentioned, if he's up there and he sees something small that he would like to address, he can't necessarily address it right at that moment. He might have to wait till after practice or into a film session to be able to address some of those things. So there's been some things that they're doing differently in spring ball this year that they haven't done in the past, that Gundy likes and is happy that they're doing, but is maybe taken away from the attention to detail that Gleason wants to have with his guys whenever he's in there and involved. So we'll see how that manifests itself going forward. NCAA rules have loosened up the number of meetings that the players can have with coaches over the summer, so that'll be important for him, I'm sure, and in furthering his knowledge of these guys. And he talked about the learning aspect of this hasn't necessarily been the offense, because he did a ton of work preparing himself to learn the offense before spring ball started. But in spring ball, he's been learning the nuances of the players, what makes them tick, how they respond to certain things, what do you have to do to make them go. All of those sorts of things have been the real learning experience for him this spring, and that'll continue on until August.
All right, lots to talk about quarterbacks, lots to talk about Sean Gleason. The offense has clearly been a big focus for the Cowboys this fall, but Barry, defense, it was not good last year for the Cowboys. If you're Jim Knowles, I know this is not a true game situation, but if you're Jim Knowles, what do you want to see out of your defense on Saturday?
Well, it depends on what kind of drills we see in the practice. You want to see physicality out of the big guys. The defensive line's been wiped out. Got some reinforcements coming, but to me, that's the biggest concern for the defense coming in. You want to at least see those guys be physical. The secondary's looking pretty good. A lot of veterans there, some young safeties sort of grew up late last year. You got the veteran corners, Green and Williams, that'll be solid players. So that's not as big of a concern. But that defensive line, that's been a very solid place for Oklahoma State for 4, 5, 6 years in a row. And now it's a question mark. So you want to see if those guys can be physical here in a spring practice.
Scotty, what about you? If you're sitting in Jim Knowles' chair in his shoes on Saturday. What do you want to see out of this defense?
You want to see guys that are competing. Barry mentioned being physical. You want to see your cornerbacks getting up in receivers' faces and in one-on-one situations and being physical and tough. You don't want to see guys getting too soft. On the defensive line, they might be outmanned by an offensive line that's got 4 returning starters at this point, but you want to see them getting physical and being tough in the ways that you are expecting them. You want to see them showing an additional layer of understanding of the defense now that they're this far into their second spring under Jim Knowles. You want to see them executing things that maybe they're going to get beat in situations against a really talented offense, but you want to see them executing with things the way that you need to see them. You want to see those safeties in the right position, not getting thrown off by what might be going on. I'm sure that the offense has at least a little bit that they haven't shown them at this point yet, maybe. So we'll see what those guys handle, how they react to those situations in a different setting. You're going to have some situations of 7-on-7. You have some situations of offensive line versus defensive line, the inside drill. You want to see those guys competing hard for the opportunities that they get. So that's the biggest thing. The execution on Saturdays in the fall. You're not going to learn a lot about that in this setting, but you want to see them taking steps forward.
All right, we've already talked about the quarterbacks. Obviously, all eyes will be on them pretty much all the time. But is there another non-quarterback player that you guys are really going to be interested to see? Barry, who are you going to be watching for on Saturday?
Non-quarterback player. Well, a guy I've always liked just because of his name, and I assume he's healthy. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scotty, but it's L.C. Greenwood. I want to see L.C. Greenwood. Of course, he's not a direct descendant of the Pittsburgh Steelers, L.C. Greenwood. I think he's a distant relative. Isn't that what we decided?
Yeah, I believe so.
So, Cowboys have this glorious streak of wide receiver depth and just producing wide receivers like crazy. So it's not easy to get on the field. If you do get on the field, you're really good. I think it'd be great if there's an L.C. Greenwood running around catching touchdown passes for the Cowboys.
Too bad they can't play Pitt again and have L.C. Greenwood in Pittsburgh. Scotty, who's that guy for you?
Well, I was going to say Tom Hutton, the punter, and I was going to say Israel Antwine, the Millwood guy who transferred from Colorado, because he's going to be an important player on that defensive line. But I'm officially going to say Thomas Harper, the true freshman, early arrival, Devin Harper's little brother, cornerback. Every time we've talked to Mike Gundy, his name has come up. He's been incredibly impressed with this kid so far. Thomas Harper was a guy who didn't even really take football all that seriously until his sophomore year of high school. He was more of a basketball guy. He's a smaller guy at 5'10", 5'11", about 175 pounds. But this is a team that's looking for some backup cornerbacks, and he's the type of guy that can be a guy there. He might not get a ton of playing time this fall, might even redshirt, but they're going to need more cornerbacks after this year and beyond. But just the raw excitement around this kid from the coaches has been really fascinating to see for a high school kid, a kid that should be in high school right now. So I'm looking forward to see what this kid can do.
All right, guys. Saturday afternoon, 1 o'clock is the start time up in Stillwater. Busy day up there with the Remember the 10 run and a big baseball series against Texas. So lots of folks probably headed that way. We'll be going that way. So be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.